On this episode of the Bitcoin Effect, I have a conversation with Nico from Simply Bitcoin, the podcast and YouTube channel he shares with his partner Phil, also known as Coinicarus. We go over a number of different topics, such as what is the Bitcoin ethos and what he thinks are the three different types of Bitcoiners, how government is losing its grip on its monopolies on information as well as on money. What are the dangers of state controlled money, CBDCs, and the Chinese social credit system? How Bitcoin responded to powerful nation state attacks on it. How does Bitcoin become a unit of account, and when does that happen? And when does hyperinflation of a fiat currency actually happen? Who's most likely to adopt Bitcoin, and who is most skeptical? And stay to the end to find out what is the effect of paper money, and who it is in history who recognized it early on. I'm Nate Martin, and this is the Bitcoin Effect. If you're looking for the best way to learn about Bitcoin explained in plain English, then join the thousands who have signed up for the free 7-day Bitcoin crash course on 99bitcoins.com. You'll receive an email with a video each day that will explain the concepts and step-by-step guides to starting your Bitcoin journey, beginning with the most popular video about Bitcoin on YouTube, What is Bitcoin?, with over 4 million views to date. Just go to 99bitcoins.com, type in your email address, and that's it. Your first video will be in your inbox as soon as you log in. Register for free today at 99bitcoins.com. Would you like to earn sats back on the purchases you were going to make anyway? With the Fold app and Fold Rewards debit card, you can. With popular retailers, restaurants, and online merchants like Amazon, Old Navy, and Under Armour, with some offering up to 17% back in Bitcoin, what better way to stack sats than with Fold? Use the link in the description and you can earn $25 just for signing up for the Fold Spin Plus debit card today on foldapp.com or find the Fold app on the App Store or Google Play. Dollar cost averaging is a simple and profitable way to begin investing in Bitcoin, and Swan Bitcoin is the easiest place to begin. Choose the amount you want to invest and whether you want that to be a daily, weekly, or monthly recurring investment. You can also buy Bitcoin instantly from your bank account with the click of a button, even as a contribution to your tax-deferred IRA. Go to swanbitcoin.com/NateM to earn $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up. That's swanbitcoin.com/NateM to start stacking sats today. On the podcast today with me is Nico from Simply Bitcoin. The podcast, the YouTube channel, you guys do daily stuff as far as the numbers, and I love your the fail, the daily fail. That's always a blast for me to watch. And matter of fact, that was one that I quoted. I didn't watch you guys do it, but I quoted it on a Twitter Spaces, the one from Brian Armstrong saying, if stable coins are actually inflation coins, then I'll stop there because if you don't know it, just go find their YouTube channel and watch their commentary on that fail. But I totally agreed with you. Didn't know that you'd done that, and I thought it was an original thought that I put it in the Twitter Spaces. But no, you'd already done it. So thank you very much for stealing my thunder. Nico, thanks for the time. I appreciate it. I wanted to get down to a question that has a lot of opportunity for interpretation. And that is this. What exactly, in your eyes and your mind, is the Bitcoin ethos? What does that mean?
Yeah, man, look, there's different spectrums of Bitcoiners. Let's just break that down. There's Fiat Bitcoiners, right? So Fiat Bitcoiner is essentially someone who's still sticking, their mentality is still in the fiat matrix, right? They're still thinking like, look, I'm going to invest in Bitcoin and then eventually I'm going to sell this Bitcoin, right? To make more fiat, right? And then, once you start heading down the rabbit hole, you start to understand that, why would you sell, the scarcest asset on the face of the planet to something that's just created out of thin air at the whims of corrupt politicians? Why would you do that, right? So, there's that type of Bitcoiner, right? The Fiat Bitcoiner. You see this with Mark Cuban. You see that with a lot of the fiat billionaires that invest into Bitcoin, but they don't quite understand it, right? And then you have, the crazy plebs, right? The crazy toxic maximalists, right? They try to give us such a hard time, and they get it, right? And they understand that Bitcoin is more than just an investment. Bitcoin is essentially private property for all mankind and potentially freedom for all mankind as well, right? What do I mean by that? So if you live in North Korea, right, you're really not allowed to have private property, but if you have a cell phone, with a little bit of data, right, all of a sudden you can download Bitcoin wallet, and if you have a seed on that wallet, or you write down your seed, boom, you have private property in North Korea. You could be in any totalitarian country, and boom, you could have private property. But not only private property, you could send that everywhere else, right? So Bitcoin ethos is, we understand, right, that this technology is much more than just an investment. This technology is going to fundamentally change how humanity functions, right? It's going to take away the barriers, the barriers that the legacy system imposes on everyone. About 60% of the world, according to, the central bankers, are unbankable because of the place that they happen to be born in, right? What the F is that,
Right.
right? So again, we understand that, this is about much more than just money. This is about the liberation of man, and there's going to be fight. There's going to be a fight. There's going to be a political fight because there's a lot of power at play here, right? So, it's the Bitcoin ethos, man, is staying true to Bitcoin. And as long as you stay true to Bitcoin by being honest, by being truthful, right? I think that, the pleb community as a whole isn't going to chew you a new one. And one of the things that I love about, the pleb community as well is that no matter how much you've contributed to Bitcoin, as long as soon as you start going down the left hand side, and you start, shilling shit coins, and, if I don't want to name any names, but specific people that have huge followings, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to experiment with this platform, you know, they'll chew you out. It doesn't matter how much you've contributed. Andreas, Andreas Antonopoulos, the person that originally orange pilled me, used to listen to his podcast literally night after night on repeat. Incredible stuff. He started shitcoining. He started, shilling Ethereum. And it's funny because as soon as someone, starts doing that, they start going away from, this staying true to Bitcoin, right? They can't handle it. They either make their Twitter private, they mute the responses, they just rage quit altogether, right? And there's a reason for that. It's because of the cognitive dissonance, right? They understand on a subconscious level that they're not living in reality, because Bitcoin is the truth. Bitcoin is anchored to the truth by proof of work, right? So even if you want to lie to yourself as much as possible, if there's a bunch of angry plebs telling you the truth, and you're like living in a false reality because you're trying to convince yourself that you're right, you see this with a lot of the shitcoiners, you're going to hate people telling you constantly the truth over and over again. So yeah, man, it's about telling the truth. It's about, believing in the open source culture, right? I contribute, that I hope someone else builds on top of that. If they don't want to, that's okay. It's all about, contributing. And then at the same time, it's about being selfless, because we have to understand that Bitcoin is much bigger than any of us. It's much bigger than getting wealthy. It's much bigger than any of this, right? It's literally about separating the money from state, right? Because as you could see, right, fiat, has enabled nation states to essentially do whatever the F they want, right? Whether that's to go to war, whether that's, pay for these crazy, social welfare programs that the only reason that they're affordable is because of the fiat money printer. And of course, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So imagine you win a popularity contest, also known as an election, and you get installed into a position of power, and then all of a sudden you're dropping bombs in Libya and Syria and Afghanistan, and you feel entitled, like you have the ability to do that. Under Bitcoin standard, war would be expensive. You wouldn't go to war because it's actually expensive to go to war. Under a fiat standard, not only could you afford it because you have an unlimited money printer, it's actually profitable to go to war, right?
Yep.
So this is about much more than, this is bigger than any of us, right? We are all of us are playing a role, all of us are playing a part, whether that's making memes, whether that's making YouTube content, whether that's making podcasts like yourself, right? Whether that's coding, whether that's contributing to Bitcoin Core, right? Everyone has a role to play. And I think that once you understand that, right, I think all of that encompassing stuff is the Bitcoin ethos, you know? So again, man, if you're against Bitcoin, you're against the freedom of man. It's that simple. There is no in, and, if, or but.
You spoke about the power, the struggle of power between who is operating fiat and eventually operating is the wrong word, but those who have control over fiat and those who have control over more Bitcoin. Because let's face it, there are a number of people or organizations that have just a bunch of Bitcoin. You know, we could talk about Michael Saylor and all day long with, I think it's now over 110,000 Bitcoin. How are you comfortable, or how do you see your role changing once Bitcoin wins? I think Bitcoin wins. You think Bitcoin wins. I think that it's pretty inevitable and undeniable. Once that happens, who do we trust with? How do we trust those that have a lot of Bitcoin with the power that they're suddenly going to assume? And they will, because now we're starting to talk about how are we going to deal one with another? What ideas are good? What ideas are bad? How do we determine the borders between those? I mean, these are big questions. How do you kind of start chipping away at the answers to those?
That's an excellent question. So two components, right? So first thing, right? The big difference between the fiat system, which is I would consider a proof of stake system, right, and a proof of work system like Bitcoin, right, is that a proof of stake system, you know, like Ethereum plans to be, and like the fiat system currently is right now, is the more you have of that said token, of that said shitcoin, the more influence and power you have over the network, right? Michael Saylor, even if he has 114,000 Bitcoins and I have my, my humble stack, right? We are the same in the eyes of the Bitcoin network. In fact, I don't have more influence over the network than Michael Saylor does, right? That's component number one. So it's radically different than the fiat system we have today, right? Where if I have more fiat, right, than you do, I could actually change the monetary policy. I could change the rules of the game to essentially help me more. With Bitcoin, it's rules without rulers, and you don't have more influence over the network. Period. Right. Another component, right, which is it's an very very old saying in Bitcoin, which is you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. Right. What do I mean by that? It means that once you take the orange pill, right? Once a politician takes the orange pill, once someone takes the orange pill, right? You can't benefit from number go up technology and take the freedom out, right? Because think about it this way, right? You take the orange pill and you think, okay, I'm gonna get really wealthy off of this. I'm gonna use this to my advantage, but at the same time, I'm gonna take the freedom out. No, they're inextricably linked. You can't disconnect them, right? So once someone, whether it's Michael Saylor, whether it's Naim Bukele, whether it's whoever, right? Once they take the orange pill, what they are inadvertently taking as well is also a freedom pill, because essentially what they're telling the world is, hey, you can get Bitcoin now too, right? And what does that mean, right? If I hold my own private keys, you could be a multi-gazillionaire. If I hold my private keys, man, you can't debase it. You can't take it away from me. You can't steal my wealth, right? And you contrast that towards the fiat system that we have now, where essentially, the bottom 45% of the US economy doesn't have enough wealth to save in equities and real estate. And then what happens, right? Something called the Cantillon effect. The top 1% and the government, they just keep on getting richer. And it's actually crazy because it's stealing from the poor that need it most and giving it to the government and giving it to the very wealthy. Hence the reason why the stock market, the S&P, is making, like, before the Evergrande whatever happened, right? The S&P was making all-time highs week after week. Why is that, right? Because of the money printer.
I asked
Yeah.
another podcaster, because you're going right down the same line as me. Is when I said this, I said, how can we even measure the stock market? Because if we're measuring the stock market by the terms of fiat, are we really even measuring the value of the stock market? Because the rule on the ruler that's measuring the stock market, the inches keep getting smaller and smaller, which makes the stock market look bigger and bigger. So can we even really get a real grasp of the value of the stock market, commodities market? I mean, any market that we're looking at is all measured in a fiat dollar. Do we even really know?
Right now, and this all started, right? Well, you could make two arguments, right? You could make the argument that this was inevitable and history is just repeating itself, which I tend to be on that side, right? But essentially, what we're entering is late stage fiat, and this all started in 2008. Okay, so 2008, the financial crisis happened, right? And of course, it was the bailout, too big to fail, was flouted around. But it was interesting because that's really when they started experimenting with QE, right? And what a lot of people don't know is that they passed this law, right, at the time where the Fed no longer had to ask permission from Congress, for these bailout packages for this printing of money. Now they could directly do it themselves. And here's the thing, QE is like heroin. Once you get a little bit of it, you just get addicted. And if you pull up the chart, right, you could see in 2008, they started, printing a little bit,
It's frightening. Yeah.
and then during the Trump administration, right, they actually tried to taper off, right? That ended up catastrophically. It caused a repo market crisis, right? And they had to reverse it. So essentially, the Fed, if anyone doesn't know how the money printing mechanism works, but essentially it's very simple. The Fed offers bonds on the open market, but the trick is though that no sovereign wealth fund or country or company on the face of the planet has enough money to buy all those bonds. So what does the Fed do? The Fed just puts it on their balance sheet, right? So it puts it on their balance sheet. It looks like a liability, and then it offers up the cash, right? So it's literally creating money out of thin air, essentially. No one's buying those bonds. The Fed is buying the bonds themselves, right? So the whole thing is a scam, right? So it started in 2008. No bankers went to jail. No justice was served, right? Coincidentally, right? Whether you want to believe a coincidence, whether you want to believe a coincidence, whether you want to believe it's destiny, whatever you want to call it, 2008, 2009 happened, and then Bitcoin was born. And in the Genesis block, because Satoshi knew that this was going to happen again, and he was correct, because in 2020, as soon as the pandemic happened, not only did they do what happened in 2008, they did it to magnitudes 10 times higher.
Yeah.
So Satoshi was so spot on. And he said in the Genesis block, Chancellor, on the second bailout for banks, right? So he knew this was going to happen. And again, when these banks or when these central banks print money, they benefit the government, and the government is the least effective and efficient allocator of capital in the history of the planet. Anything that any government project ever, or any government that they try to put together, it's a catastrophe. It goes over budget. It's not profitable. Why is that? Why is it a catastrophe? Because they know in the back of their head, right, it's okay, we got a money printer, everything's all good. We left $80 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. We're supposed to be okay with that.
No, yeah,
I've been paying for terrorism for the last 10 years, essentially, because through my taxes, every single American citizen has been paying for terrorism for the last 10 years.
And
right?
It's not just through taxes.
This is
it's through inflation, which, I still consider taxes to be taxation with representation, at least to some degree. Give me at least that much. I mean, I know that people say all taxation is theft and what have you. I'll get into that later if we so choose. But the taxation without representation is now happening in the form of inflation, in the form of the money printing like you're talking about, because they're simply stealing our value without our being able to vote on it or even to talk to anybody about it. We're just going to print the money, and we can't even complain to anybody except ourselves that, you know what, the price of meat just went from $5 to $10 a pound, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, no, totally. And we're living through a very interesting time, because essentially what's happening is we're transitioning from the industrial age, right, to the information age, right? And essentially the government, nation states had a total monopoly on information, and they had a total monopoly on money, right? But all at the same time, right? They are losing their monopoly on information with social media and the internet, right? And the truth trickles out. They'll try to censor and fact check all they want, but they'll videos, tweets, they come out and you see the truth. They can't stop it, right? And at the same time, right, they're also losing their monopoly on the creation of money, right? So, for the first time in human history, if you don't like how your government is behaving, you literally opt out of their currency. That is a direct attack on their power, and they don't have the monopoly on information anymore. So it's like you're getting the truth, and you're getting a way out at the same time. So this is all the chaos that's going on right now. And you have different governments reacting in different ways. You have Australia, that's proposing, IDs just to use the internet, just to use social media. You have in the United States, you have the social media platforms. They're censoring people as well, right? They deplatform Trump, whether you like him or not, right? That was pretty crazy. So again, and all of this is caused, right, because of this transition that we're living through, and I think that things are going to get progressively worse, right, as governments and politicians come to terms with the fact that their standard operating procedure of I got elected and now I could do whatever I want, Bitcoin takes that away from them, and they're actually going to have to start providing value for people to willingly park their money in dollars, or people willingly to give up their money and put it into fiat, into the new version, because I don't think the dollar is ever going to go away. It's just not going to be the fiat dollar,
Okay.
So it's very interesting times.
When you say things are going to get progressively worse, for whom and in what regard?
So to me, it's a tragedy, because so for who, it's a very simple question. For the people, the bottom 50% of of the economic scale, right? The wealthier you are, you could always just jump on a plane, go away, or you have mobility, right? You could pick up your stuff, go. Bitcoin also gives you tremendous power in that regard, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, they just don't have the means to do that, and their countries will literally hold them hostage, to kind of use them as tax cattle, essentially, for lack of a better phrase. So that's who it's going to get worse from, right? Worse too. Now, why, like, how is it going to get worse? So essentially what's happening right now, right, just put the conspiracy aside, put the conspiracy theories aside and all that stuff, right, is that governments know they're going to default. Okay, they know that this fiat experiment is coming very close to an end, right? So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to use COVID, right, as a way to do, you've heard this before, a reset,
Mhm.
right? And the mechanisms in which they're trying to do that, right? I'm just going to give examples in the US because that's the topic I'm most, informed on. Is, the Biden administration wants to do a proposal where every single transaction, if it's above $600, is reported to the IRS, right? And he also snuck something into the infrastructure bill, right, which clearly doesn't define whether a miner or a node operator is a broker. And there's also, he snuck something else into the infrastructure bill where essentially, if you want to send $10,000 or more to anybody through with Bitcoin, you have to provide their full name, their date of birth, their social security number, and the reason as to why you sent that transaction to that said person, right? All of these things are completely against the Fourth Amendment, right? Which clearly says, no unreasonable search and seizure. You could only be searched through probable cause. It's a complete abuse of power. And the reason that they're doing this is because they want to shut off the escape valve, right? When I mean escape valve, it's Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a direct attack, and it's a direct threat to nation states and their standard operating procedure. And what it does is it shifts the balance of power from the state back to the people. Why? Because it's extremely hard to confiscate. think about it this way, right? If you have, if you want to get up and go, right? And the example that I always give is 1930s Germany, right? I don't want to say 1930s Germany and Germans, there was a political party there that happened to go after a specific ethnic class, right? And they called it a cleansing. Atrocious stuff happened, but a lot of the reason that that specific ethnic group didn't flee Germany in the 1930s is because the government, one of the first things they did when they got into power, right, was essentially make everyone report how much money they had in their bank account. And they had to, and they made them wear certain things. And then you could kind of see the similarities of what's going on now with the the Rona passports, I'll say that. Right. So there's a lot of similarities. And again, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Right. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason why Bitcoin is so special. It gives you two abilities, right? It gives you the power to vote with your wallet, but also your feet. In 1930s Germany, a lot of that ethnic group did not flee because they couldn't bring their wealth with them. And let's say they could bring it with them. Let's say they got out of Germany, they managed to sneak out of the border, get on a train, go to Great Britain, go to the United States, right? What's the first thing that customs officials do when you go into that country? They're going to search your stuff. There's a law in the United States. If you have more than $10,000 of valuables, guess what? Gets seized at the border, right? So what happens with Bitcoin? Bitcoin completely changes that. Why does it change that? Because for the first time, if you could memorize 24 words, which you will be able to if you're under duress, right? What are they going to do? Do you have anything? No. Are they going to search your mind? They physically can't.
Right.
So all of a sudden, it becomes on a local level, perhaps you could prosecute some people, right? But if a country of 350 million people, right, the United States of America, that has the most guns per capita in the world, right? Do you think the government's going to go knocking on doors asking for people's seed phrases? That's not going to happen. Right. So it dramatically changes the dynamics of power. And what it does is it changes them from the state, from the nation state, right, to the individual. Right. And again, this is the transition from the industrial age to the information age. We're living through it. And this is just going to get progressively, because they're going to try to hold on to that power. Think about it like a caged animal,
to the
man.
last thread.
Like,
absolutely.
They're gonna hold it on to the last thread. They're gonna do whatever they want. They're gonna break whatever rule. They're gonna move the goalposts. You see the articles from the IMF about Nayib Bukele. I've never seen so many mainstream articles being released against a tiny little country of El Salvador, bashing that country. A year ago, they weren't talking about it. But now that they made Bitcoin legal tender and it threatens the legacy financial system, all of a sudden he's a threat to democracy. You get what I'm trying to tell you? So it's like, man, this is just the beginning. We're in the beginning of the then they fight you stage. Right. It's going to get worse, but then we win, right? And we win, of course, because we have much better, or better said, Bitcoin provides much better incentives than the traditional legacy system.
Well, it keeps your incentives in your own person, basically. And you talked about this, and I've always seen the difference between Bitcoin and, say, gold or other physical assets is this. Not only is it harder to confiscate, but over the period of years, I mean, I looked at investing in gold and silver and all those things, as I was growing in years. It was like, I couldn't get there. I couldn't see paying the fees, the brokerage fees. I couldn't see paying for the storage. I couldn't see, all of the logistics of either getting it in my possession or having to pay for some custodian to do it. And so there was a wall between the middle class investor and being able to purchase money that the state didn't control, gold, silver, palladium, what have you. Bitcoin changed that, because you can pull out your phone and buy $50 of Bitcoin right now. And that's what's made this money different from any other money that the governments, like you've been talking about, have been able to squelch and take control over. And I think that is one huge development, is just the ease of access for the ordinary person to a money that is not state controlled. And I think you would agree with that. That's just one aspect of why Bitcoin is so much different from any other sound money that we've had before.
Absolutely. That no, I completely agree with you. I think that the friction of being able to send and receive transactions is so much better, because gold's worked as sound money, but gold has two issues, right? No one knows how much gold is in the ground, and no one knows how much gold is floating in outer space, right? There's two things, right? And then the main issue, right, is the weight of gold, right? So if you have 100 or 200 or $1 million worth of gold is very heavy.
Heavy.
So, and not only that, like, how are you going to cross a border with a brick bar like that, and that's all your family's wealth?
Do you have anything
that
to
makes
declare? No.
it's incredibly difficult, right? So that changes again, it changes the balance of power from the state, because they have a total monopoly on violence, is really what it is, right? Where, yeah, like, we're just going to seize all the gold because all the gold is in vaults, right? Because that's the safest place to do it. FDR did that with Order 6102 in 1930s in the Great Depression, right? He didn't want people to, escape or use the escape valve. But then you have something like Bitcoin, right? Where, like, literally, let's say, and to be honest with you, like, I think this is inevitable, where, like, a country like the United States or like Europe outright ban this, trying to keep the bureaucracy, what we call the deep state, alive, right? And they try to ban Bitcoin, but what they don't realize is, like, it doesn't matter. This thing's going to keep going. It doesn't matter if you ban it. Like, it doesn't matter if you ban the custody of it. What are you going to do? You're going to go and knock on everyone's door and say, "Give me your seed." Like, and there's a lot of us, right, specifically in my generation, right, the younger Bitcoiners, I would say the early 30s and late 20s and below. Man, we sound like revolutionaries, all of us. And there's a reason for that, is because we know what's at stake here. We see a future where it's like slavery, which is central bank digital currencies, which is what they want, right? And Bitcoin, right? And with central bank digital currencies, right? And they're using the COVID, everything that's happening right now with the world is kind of like, the supply chain, that's the reason that this is all failing. They're trying to use that as the cover up and the justification to try to implement these central bank digital currencies. And what central bank digital currencies is going to allow the state to do is absolutely terrifying. They don't like the way you cross the street because you jaywalked. They close your checking account. They don't like the way that you do this. You can't fly on certain flights. They don't like the way that you behave because you voted for the wrong political opponent. Oh, well, your kid can't go to that school. You don't believe me? Look at China. Look at China. That's exactly what they already have there. It's called the social credit system. And if you have that connected with literally a government app, right, where not even your bank is in between, it's literally a relationship. Your money is a relationship between you and the government, right? The possibilities of how that can be abused are just endless, right? So you have that, which is slavery, and you have Bitcoin. Now, what a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of people are still stuck in, what I call the bread and circuses, right? Sports and, entertainment, Netflix and all that stuff. What a lot of people don't understand is that there is no in between. There is no middle ground, right? The battle lines have been obfuscated because of what's been going on, but they are going to get more and more and more and more defined. And people are going to have to pick between dangerous freedom and comfortable slavery. That's the future we're heading towards, right? And this is all going to happen within the next 10, 15 years, like, without a shadow of a doubt, because governments have no choice at this point but to implement central bank digital currencies or be at risk of being left behind by Bitcoin. The issue and the problem that they don't understand is that whatever they offer is never going to be as good as Bitcoin, because governments have to operate on debasing their currency in order to fund their own bureaucracy. Does that make sense?
It does, and you said something that's very important, and it was kind of a paraphrase of Benjamin Franklin's famous quote, which is, if the people would give up their liberty for security, then they deserve both. They're neither. Excuse me. Then they deserve neither. And you talk about dangerous freedom versus comfortable slavery, and I'll just bring up, just for kicks and giggles, one obstacle that a lot of people would put in our way as far as a logical argument would be, what about sanctions against what would be bad actor nation states? Do we just have to prepare for the fact that there's going to be more, perhaps smaller violence because, Bitcoin won't allow governments to actually, just overspend to the point where they just exhaust every resource available? How do you see, what's the problem hold, and how does that kind of shake out?
That's a phenomenal question. So large scale violence, Bitcoin will destroy. Violence will become localized, right? And violence will become essentially towards, people who hold Bitcoin or people who hold digital assets, right? You might have a target on your back. It's literally the reality of the situation, right? But this idea of, like Russia, going to war with the US, right? Not only did the nuclear weapon really kind of, make that obsolete, right? Because nobody wants to just destroy everything.
Right.
But also, governments are just not going to be able to afford it, right? And not only are they not going to be able to afford it, it's actually going to be more profitable to be at peace, right? So what I envision in the future, right, is we're going to have some sort of more localization, right? So in the United States is perfectly prepared for this, right? Because it is the unlike a lot of the countries, all of most countries around the world, right? In the United States, each state has a lot of sovereignty over the federal government.
It was
So
built
what's
for
going to end up,
this.
it was literally built for
Yeah.
this. So what's going to happen is Texas is going to become a Bitcoin stronghold. Florida is already heading down that route as well. Wyoming is heading down that route. And let's say the federal government is like, oh, we're going to ban Bitcoin. Essentially, what's going to happen is the same thing with the marijuana laws. Marijuana is illegal on a federal level, right? But if you go to California, you can go walk into a dispensary, you could buy yourself some marijuana. You go to Colorado, you could buy yourself some marijuana. So the federal government might say, oh, Bitcoin's illegal. And then Wyoming's like, no, because that's a huge part of my GDP. Texas is going to be like, no, because that provides a lot of value and worth and jobs to my state. Florida, same thing, right? City of Miami, they're building their whole thing, this whole platform on being the future Bitcoin capital of the world, right? So all the politicians from those states are going to say, you want to ban Bitcoin? You guys could go fuck yourselves. And the thing is, Bitcoin gives them the ability to do that. And they can't stop it. That's the thing. They can't stop it even if they wanted to, right? And a great example of this, right, which is absolutely fascinating. They're going to write a book about this, okay? 2017 was the fork wars, okay, which was a bunch of big corporations and big mining conglomerates tried to change the rules of Bitcoin to benefit them financially. They failed because the users, right, the users that are running the nodes voted against that software, created the fork, Bitcoin Cash. You see where Bitcoin Cash is today. You see where BSV is today. There's a winner, which was Bitcoin. The users won, right? That was a very important stress test of Bitcoin. Another one that's not being really talked about because it just happened, but it has the same amount of significance, was that a nation state essentially attacked Bitcoin. And one of the most powerful nation states in the world,
Right.
China, right? They banned Bitcoin mining. And what was absolutely fascinating, right, is that the hash rate not only recovered, it recovered in record speed. It just went up like crazy, and it decentralized the hash rate. So it actually made Bitcoin stronger, right? So, and there's this thing, and I tweeted it out today, some original thought. It's like, I welcome more attacks to Bitcoin, because attacking Bitcoin has the exact opposite effect of its intended purpose. It actually makes Bitcoin more resilient It makes it stronger, right? The old age adage, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So all of these things were necessary. The 2017 fork wars proved that it was the users that controlled the network. And then in 2021, it was China banning, because remember the China FUD, it's like China has the majority of the hash rate. Well, that FUD is dead.
Done.
Right? So who has the majority of the hash rate now? It's distributed all around the world. So then how do you kill this thing? You don't. That's the crazy part. So governments are going to have to come to terms with this. And now here's the thing. Governments, and the thing that I always say is that it's very expensive to resist Bitcoin. And it's actually much more profitable to just adopt it and tax it rather than try to fight it. If you try to fight it, governments that try to fight it, they're going to have fun staying poor. And the governments that adopt it are going to flourish, not only themselves, but also their people. But what they don't realize is what I told you before. Once those governments take the orange pill, right, like Nayib Bukele, like in El Salvador, you can't have the number go up and flourishing without the freedom that comes along with it, right? So they're essentially, I call it a poison pill. It's like their own the demise of the traditional bureaucracy that we just lived through in the 20th century.
When do you see Bitcoin, because we're making strides, like you talk about, there are nation states that are actually beginning to adopt Bitcoin. And what I've said is that you put a Bitcoin ruler down into the mud just to see how deep the mud is. And the mud just keeps getting deeper and deeper, but the ruler never changes, which is why you see what a deflationary economy is going to look like. When do we finally hop from the second stage, which is the first stage is store of value. Second stage is doggone it, I speak for a living and I'm trying to get the thought here, a means of exchange. And finally, a unit of account. When do we start finally seeing things priced in or measured by Bitcoin? How does that happen?
The fiat system has to collapse. And I don't think the fiat system lasts more than 10, 15 years when the price of oil, and that's the beautiful part too, right? Because the energy sector and Bitcoin is a match made in heaven.
Oh,
right?
It really
because
is.
All that stranded, energy all around the world or the wasted energy, right? That's just too far away from any, populated area to be used, right? Now it has value. That wasted energy could be potentially Satoshi's, right? So when oil and energy start getting priced in Bitcoin, I think it's game over.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the fiat system as we know it, the gold bugs have been saying this for so long, and I think them as human beings, right? We're trapped, right? Because like I know history is long, right? But our lives are relatively short. So we see that it's coming, but we're very, very bad at, saying, oh, it's right around the corner, because to us, it's like, this is going to collapse. Look how much they're printing. Right. But man, like this thing could have another 10 years left in it. This thing could have another 15 years in it. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that the world that we're heading in, right, things are going to be priced in Satoshis. Things are going to be priced in Bitcoin. Things are not going to be priced in fiat anymore, because people are going to lose confidence. And that's the thing. And that's the component that a lot of people don't understand, right? Is that fiat doesn't collapse because, hyperinflation doesn't happen just because the government starts printing a crap ton of money and then everything starts hyperinflating. Fiat, right? And you look at the definition of fiat, right? What is fiat? What is the US dollar backed by? The full faith of the US government, right? Fiat collapses when a critical mass of the population lose faith in the fiat dollar. Then it collapses.
And it
collapses
pretty strong. Yeah. When more and more people say, I don't take dollars.
Exactly. They look at it, and I can't look at paper money the same way anymore. I look at this, I'm like, there's an old man and there's a pyramid with an eye on the back of this. What the F is this? What is this stuff? Like what am I living in the 1800s? That's what I feel like when I'm holding cash. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a little boy, I was like $100, like, oh my God, it's $100, you know? But once you take the orange pill, you know, you're denominating on Bitcoin and a money that's based on energy and time, right? Literally the things that encompass the universe, right? You know, you're looking at this artificially created monopoly money. You're like, what the hell is this? So the inflation that the government is creating because of the amount of money that they're printing, right? And here's the thing, they say they could taper off. They won't
can't.
be able to without the S&P, without the stock market collapsing,
Yeah.
right? So again, it's going to reach a point where all of this money printing, right? All of this money printing, people are going to start waking up. And there's a very, and I'll shut up because I know I've been ranting for a while. Andreas Antonopoulos has this amazing quote, right? And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've been podcasting for 5 years plus now, right, is convincing someone about Bitcoin in Venezuela or in Argentina or in Turkey, you know, convince them like this is Bitcoin. You know, it's peer to peer without the state involved. They're like, where can I sign up? How do I do this? They get it like this because they know what hyperinflation. They know what inflation feels like.
Yep.
You speak to someone in the West or in a developed country, right, about this, you know, this magic internet money, which is Bitcoin, right? They're like, but there's Venmo, there's PayPal, right? So the point that I'm trying to say is that the quote that Andreas Antonopoulos says is that no one cares until the money breaks. So until the money breaks, people are not going to wake up. But we are getting, again, like I said, relatively close on a historical time scale, on a human time scale, years out.
Sure.
You know, it could be a decade, it could be 5 years, it could be 15 years. No one knows.
Yeah. And this isn't for me anymore. I mean, you know, you take a look at the lines across my forehead and you can tell I've got a few years on me. You know, I have to think about the fact that I might not be the one that's benefiting from this. It's going to be my kids and it's going to be my grandkids.
Yeah, but you
know,
but you will. You're not. You got lines on your forehead, but you're not that old either, man. Come on now.
I'd give you a guess, but that's a whole nother cup of coffee. So that's I appreciate that. But I do need to think about the fact that, you know, I'm not going to have a full lifetime to be able to enjoy the benefits of what we're talking about here. I need to start thinking about my posterity. I need to start thinking about the posterity of the country and the people that come at, you know, the people that come after me. How do they benefit? And you talked about this way early on in our conversation. It's about selflessness. You know, it's not, you know, a lot of people get into Bitcoin I won't say the C word but you know, they're shit coins. You know, they get in because it's self-interest to them. You know, but there's so much more to it. And we've discussed so much of this over the period of time that we've had an opportunity to talk. And thank you for the time. It's just, you know, these are things that need to be discussed. And I'm glad that we have an opportunity to discuss them on podcast. I'm hoping that more of an audience than just the plebs that are on Twitter Spaces have an opportunity to hear this too, because these are the important topics. You know, what do we look like as nations, or at least as communities? Because you say that nation states really kind of need to shrink down, and like you said, I'm all about this. The United States was perfectly set up as the type of community or group of communities that should exist with a sound money system, and Bitcoin is the sound money system. And it's been refreshing to talk to you and kind of hear your perspectives on some of the questions. I know I've thrown a lot at you as far as, you know, philosophical and political discussion is concerned. You're a technical guy. I'm not. I think deep and try to get answers, or at least ideas, flowing forward, because we know that Bitcoin wins. And the question then is, then what? And that's why we have these conversations. So Nico, from Simply Big, I almost said Simply Podcast, from Simply Bitcoin, let the listeners and viewers know how they can get in touch with you, or how they can see more conversations that you're involved with.
Absolutely. But before I do that, I just want to read one quote from a very famous gentleman that I'll reveal who it was at the end. Quote goes, "Paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have, to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice." George Washington. So just to kind of give you a frame of reference of what the founding fathers thought of paper money themselves. The founding father of America, George Washington. Those are his thoughts. But guys, if you want to hear more about me, you can find me on Twitter at BitVault7. Just ranting toxic stuff, but it's entertaining, I guess. And of course, you could find me daily on YouTube. Subscribe to my show, Simply Bitcoin, if you want to hear the Bitcoin news from the plebe perspective and the catastrophic fails from all the fiat economists, the central bankers, the party of Davos, all those crazy communists, all of them. We like to cover them all. Thank you so much, Nate, for having me on. Really had a great time.
As did I. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you know when a new episode comes out or when we go live. Also, let me know in the comments below any questions you might have about Bitcoin or what the future may hold as more and more people, institutions, and even countries begin adopting Bitcoin, and it begins to have an effect on our economies, policies, and your everyday life. Thanks for joining me here on the Bitcoin Effect.